The moment Daniel Matthews locked eyes with his new boss across the conference table, time seemed to freeze. It wasn't just that Sophia Chen was intimidatingly competent or impossibly elegant in her tailored suit. It was the way she smiled at his son's photo on his desk, the exact same smile his late wife used to give their boy. How could a complete stranger mirror something so personal, so precious? And why did fate bring this woman into his life now, just when he'd finally found his footing as a single father? Stay with me to discover how one unexpected connection changes everything for this struggling dad and his son. If this journey of healing and unexpected family touches your heart, please like this video and subscribe to see more stories that remind us how love finds us in the most surprising ways. Daniel clutched his coffee mug tightly as he hurried through the office doors, already 15 minutes late. The morning had been chaos. Jake had forgotten his science project, the babysitter had cancelled last minute, and the traffic had been merciless. 6 months into single parenthood, and he still couldn't get the rhythm right. Matthews. Conference room, now, his colleague whispered urgently as Daniel dropped his weathered messenger bag beside his desk. The new director is here. Daniel groaned inwardly. Perfect timing to make a terrible first impression on the person who now controlled his professional fate. He quickly ran a hand through his disheveled hair and straightened his rumpled tie before slipping into the conference room, hoping to blend into the background. But Sophia Chen noticed everything. As the new regional director of their marketing firm, she had a reputation for razor-sharp attention to detail. When her dark eyes landed on Daniel's late entrance, he expected disapproval. Instead, there was something else, curiosity, perhaps. Mr. Matthews, I presume? Her voice carried across the room with quiet authority. I was just reviewing the Thompson campaign. I understand you were the lead creative on that project? Daniel nodded, surprised she knew his work. Yes, that was mine. Impressive emotional resonance. We'll talk more after the meeting. The meeting proceeded, but Daniel found himself distracted by his new boss. There was something familiar about her mannerisms, the way she tilted her head when listening intently, how she absently twisted her pen when deep in thought. By the time the meeting ended, he'd convinced himself he was imagining things. As promised, Sophia stopped by his desk later that afternoon. Her eyes landed on the framed photo of Jake, his 7-year-old son, grinning widely with a missing front tooth. Your son? She asked. Jake. He's 7, Daniel replied, the pride in his voice unmistakable. Something shifted in Sophia's expression, a softening around her eyes, a gentle curve of her lips that transformed her professional demeanor into something warmer, more vulnerable. It was that smile, the one that stopped Daniel's heart because it was so achingly familiar. He has your eyes, she said softly, and in that moment, Daniel saw it clearly. The way she looked at his son's photo was exactly how Maria, his late wife, used to look at Jake, with that particular blend of tenderness and fierce protection that he thought was uniquely his wife's. I'm sorry about being late this morning, Daniel said, trying to regain his professional composure. My son's babysitter cancelled, and... No need to explain, Sophia interrupted. I understand completely. Family comes first. There was something in her tone, a depth of understanding that seemed to come from personal experience rather than corporate platitudes. Over the next few weeks, Daniel found himself increasingly drawn to Sophia's presence. She wasn't just brilliant at her job, she possessed a quiet compassion that permeated her leadership style. When Jake came down with the flu and Daniel needed to work from home, Sophia not only approved without hesitation but also sent over homemade chicken soup with a handwritten note wishing Jake a speedy recovery. Your boss sent soup? Daniel's sister Rebecca asked incredulously during one of her visits to help with Jake. That's unusual. Sophia's different, Daniel replied, realizing he'd started thinking of his boss by her first name. She understands what it's like to juggle everything. Rebecca raised an eyebrow. And how would she know that? Daniel paused, realizing he didn't actually know much about Sophia's personal life. She kept those boundaries firmly in place, maintaining a professional relationship with everyone at the office. Yet somehow, he felt a connection to her that defied explanation. The mystery deepened when Daniel attended a company charity event and spotted Sophia kneeling to speak with a young boy about Jake's age. The tenderness in her interaction was unmistakable, but when she noticed Daniel watching, she quickly straightened and resumed her professional demeanor. It was Jake who ultimately bridged the gap. When the school called one afternoon about Jake falling on the playground, Daniel was trapped in a client presentation he couldn't leave. In desperation, he texted Sophia to apologize for stepping out of the meeting. Instead, she surprised him by saying, "Go to your son. I'll handle the clients." When Daniel arrived at the school, he was shocked to find Sophia already there, sitting beside Jake in the nurse's office, gently holding an ice pack to his swollen knee. "Ms. Chen said she's your boss," Jake explained, looking considerably more cheerful than a child with a badly scraped knee should. "She knows all about dinosaurs, Dad. Even the really rare ones." Sophia looked almost embarrassed. "I hope you don't mind. When you mentioned which school, I realized it was on my way. I thought you might be caught in traffic." "Thank you," Daniel said, the words inadequate for the gratitude washing through him. "But how did they let you see him? You're not on his emergency contact list." A shadow crossed Sophia's face. "I may have implied I was family. I apologize if that was overstepping." Later, after Jake was settled at home with his knee bandaged and a dinosaur documentary playing, Daniel found himself sitting across from Sophia at his kitchen table, 2 mugs of tea between them. "You didn't have to stay," he said. "I wanted to make sure he was okay." She stared into her tea. "He reminds me of someone." The confession hung in the air between them, an opening Daniel hadn't expected. "Who?" he asked gently. Sophia's professional facade cracked slightly. "My son, Ethan. He would have been 8 this year." The past tense hit Daniel like a physical blow. "I'm so sorry," he whispered, understanding flooding through him. The familiar way she looked at Jake, the instinctive knowledge of how to comfort a child, it all made sense now. "Car accident, 2 years ago," Sophia continued, her voice steady despite the pain evident in her eyes. "My husband was driving. Neither survived." Daniel reached across the table, his hand covering hers before he could think better of it. "I lost Maria to cancer when Jake was 4. Some days, I still don't know how we're managing." "But you are," Sophia said, looking toward the living room where Jake's laughter could be heard. "That's what matters." That evening marked a turning point. The shared understanding of loss created a bridge between them that transcended their professional relationship. Daniel began to see Sophia not just as his boss or even as a friend, but as someone who truly understood the hollow spaces grief carves into a life. For Sophia, Jake became a bittersweet reminder of what she'd lost, but also a connection to the maternal love she feared had nowhere to go. She began to appear more frequently in their lives, bringing books Jake might enjoy, offering to help when Daniel mentioned school projects, even attending Jake's soccer games when her schedule allowed. The office noticed the change. Whispers circulated about favoritism, about inappropriate relationships between a director and her subordinate. Daniel tried to ignore them, but the tension became palpable when he was assigned to lead a major new campaign over colleagues with more seniority. "People are talking," his friend Mark warned during lunch. "They're saying you're only getting these opportunities because you and Chen have something going on." "That's ridiculous," Daniel protested, though he couldn't deny that his relationship with Sophia had evolved into something complex and undefined. "She's just been kind to Jake and me." "Maybe," Mark replied skeptically. "But perception matters in this business." The rumors reached Sophia too. Daniel could see it in the growing distance she began to place between them at work, the return to Mr. Matthews in meetings, the formal emails replacing their casual conversations. The professional boundaries were being reconstructed, brick by painful brick. The situation came to a head when Daniel was passed over for a promotion he'd been all but promised. When he questioned Sophia about it in her office, her expression was carefully neutral. "Your qualifications are excellent, Daniel, but the timing isn't right." "Because people are talking about us," he challenged, frustration overriding his usual caution. Sophia's composure slipped. "Because I can't give you special treatment, even if," she stopped herself. "Even if what?" Daniel pressed. "Even if I care about you and Jake more than I should," she admitted quietly. "I can't let my personal feelings compromise my professional judgment. It wouldn't be fair to you or anyone else." The acknowledgement of feelings hung between them, neither fully willing to define what those feelings were. Daniel left her office with more questions than answers, and a heaviness in his chest that felt remarkably like loss all over again. That evening, as Daniel helped Jake with homework, his son looked up suddenly. "Is Ms. Chen mad at us? She hasn't come over in 2 weeks." The innocent question pierced Daniel's heart. Without realizing it, Sophia had become important not just to him, but to Jake as well. "She's very busy with work, buddy." "But she promised to help with my science fair project," Jake persisted. "She said she used to be a science teacher before she worked with you." Daniel blinked in surprise. This was news to him. "She was a teacher?" Jake nodded emphatically. "Before Ethan died. She told me when you were making dinner last time. She said teaching kids was her favorite job ever, but it made her too sad after Ethan went to heaven." The revelation shifted something in Daniel's understanding. Sophia hadn't just been a mother, she'd dedicated her professional life to children as well. Her current career in marketing was a retreat from the pain, not her original passion. The next day, Daniel made a decision. He submitted his resignation letter, explaining that he needed to find a position that wouldn't create complications for either of them. It was the honorable thing to do, he reasoned, even as the thought of not seeing Sophia regularly created a hollow feeling in his chest. Sophia called him into her office immediately after receiving his resignation. "This is unnecessary," she said, the letter sitting between them on her desk. "It's the only solution that makes sense," Daniel argued. "You can't promote me without feeding the rumors, and I can't stay in a position where I've hit a ceiling for reasons that have nothing to do with my work." "And Jake?" Sophia asked quietly. "Have you considered what this means for him?" The question caught Daniel off guard. "What do you mean?" "He's lost enough people in his life, Daniel. Now you're choosing to remove someone else he's grown attached to." The accusation stung because there was truth in it. Jake had formed a bond with Sophia, one that Daniel had encouraged despite knowing the professional complications it might create. "Then what's your solution?" Daniel asked, frustration evident in his voice. "We can't keep pretending there's nothing between us while also trying to maintain a normal boss-employee relationship. It's not working." Sophia was quiet for a long moment, her gaze fixed on the photo of Jake she'd somehow acquired for her desk. "I've been offered a position with the education foundation our company supports. Teaching again, developing programs for underprivileged schools. I was going to turn it down." "Why?" Daniel asked, though he suspected he knew the answer. "Because it would mean leaving all this behind," she gestured to the office. "The career I built to distract myself from grief. The safe distance I've maintained from anything that reminds me too much of Ethan." Her eyes met his. "The professional boundaries that have kept me from acknowledging how I feel about you and Jake." The confession hung in the air between them, fragile and momentous. "Take the foundation job," Daniel said softly. "Not because of me or us, whatever that might be, but because it's what you loved before. Jake told me you were a teacher." A smile touched Sophia's lips. "He wasn't supposed to share that." "He admires you," Daniel said simply. "We both do." 2 months later, Daniel sat in the audience of a community center, watching as Sophia presented the foundation's new initiative for after-school science programs. Jake sat beside him, practically vibrating with excitement because he'd been promised a tour of the lab equipment afterward. They were no longer boss and employee. The rumors at the office had faded as quickly as they'd begun once Sophia left for her new position. Daniel had withdrawn his resignation and earned the promotion on his own merits under a new director who had no personal connection to him whatsoever. But personal connections, Daniel had learned, were the foundation of healing. As he watched Sophia in her element, passionate about education and unguarded in her enthusiasm, he saw the woman she had been before loss had reshaped her life. The woman she was finding her way back to being. After the presentation, as Jake explored the science exhibits with other children, Sophia joined Daniel on a bench overlooking the activity. "He's going to sleep well tonight," Daniel observed as Jake excitedly examined a microscope. "Thank you for including him in this." "He's my best consultant," Sophia replied with a smile. "Tells me exactly what kids his age find boring or cool." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching Jake interact with a world Sophia had helped create for him. "I've been thinking," Daniel said finally, "about purpose, and how sometimes the hardest things in our lives lead us to where we're meant to be." Sophia turned to him, her expression open. "And where do you think you're meant to be?" Daniel took her hand, a gesture that would have been unthinkable months ago in their professional relationship but now felt like the most natural thing in the world. "Wherever Jake is happy," he said honestly. "And lately, that seems to be wherever you are too." Sophia's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "I never expected to find a second chance at family," she admitted. "I thought that part of my life was over." "I think," Daniel said carefully, "that family finds us when we need it most, even if it doesn't look the way we expected." As Jake bounded over to show them a rock he'd examined under the microscope, his excitement palpable, Daniel saw in Sophia's expression the same look Maria used to have, that blend of love, pride, and protective instinct that defined parenthood. But now, instead of bringing pain, the similarity brought comfort. Two women, separated by time and circumstance, both loving his son with their whole hearts. Later that evening, as they shared dinner at Daniel's home, a routine that had become increasingly common, Jake asked the question that had been forming in his young mind for months. "Ms. Chen, are you going to be my new mom someday?" The directness of children could still take Daniel's breath away. He started to intervene, to explain that relationships were complicated and that no one could replace his mother, but Sophia gently placed her hand on his arm. "Jake," she said, her voice gentle but honest, "I could never replace your mom. She'll always be your mom, and she'll always be special in a way no one else can be." Jake considered this, his brow furrowed in thought. "But Ethan is always going to be your son too, right? Even though he's in heaven?" Sophia nodded, emotion making her voice slightly unsteady. "Exactly right." "So," Jake reasoned with the straightforward logic of childhood, "maybe families can have people in heaven and people here. And the people here can love each other even while remembering the people in heaven." Daniel felt his throat tighten with emotion as he watched Sophia absorb his son's wisdom. In that moment, he saw clearly what had been gradually revealing itself over months, that purpose often disguised itself as coincidence, that healing rarely followed a straight path, and that love, in all its forms, was worth the risk of pain. "I think," Sophia said carefully, looking from Jake to Daniel, "that sounds like a very wise way of understanding family." 6 months later, as Daniel watched Sophia help Jake prepare for his first science fair under her guidance, he marveled at how thoroughly she had integrated into their lives. The woman who had once been his intimidating boss was now the person who knew exactly how Jake liked his sandwiches cut and which bedtime stories would calm his occasional nightmares.
"Dad!" Jake called from the kitchen table where his project was spread out. "Sophia says my hypothesis needs work. Can you help?" Daniel smiled at the casual use of Sophia's first name, a transition Jake had made on his own, somewhere between weekend museum trips and Thursday night homework sessions. "I think Sophia might be the expert here, buddy," Daniel replied, joining them at the table. "She's the one with the teaching background." Sophia laughed, her eyes meeting Daniel's with warmth. But you're the marketing expert. He needs to sell this project to the judges. As they worked together, helping Jake refine his presentation, Daniel felt a sense of rightness settle over him. This wasn't the family he had planned, but it was becoming the family they all needed. The science fair arrived on a crisp autumn morning. Jake stood proudly beside his display on renewable energy, a topic Sophia had helped him explore through books and simple experiments at home. Daniel watched from the sidelines as his son confidently explained his findings to the judges, using presentation techniques they'd practiced together for weeks. "He's a natural," Sophia whispered, standing close enough that Daniel could feel her warmth. "Look at how he's engaging with them." When Jake was awarded second place, his face lit up with pride. In the celebration that followed, as they took photos together with his ribbon, a teacher approached them with a smile. "You must be so proud of your son," she said to Daniel and Sophia. Before Daniel could explain their complicated relationship, Jake beamed and said, "They are. My dad helped with the display board, and Sophia helped with all the science stuff because she used to be a teacher." The simplicity of his explanation, free from the need to define or categorize their relationship, struck Daniel profoundly. Children saw what adults often complicated: people who cared for each other, supporting one another through life's challenges. That evening, after Jake had gone to bed, exhausted but happy, Daniel and Sophia sat on the porch swing, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. "I've been thinking," Sophia said quietly, "about what Jake said at the science fair. How easily he explained us to his teacher." Daniel nodded, his hand finding hers in the gathering darkness. "Kids have a way of cutting through the noise. Do you ever wonder," she continued, her voice thoughtful, "if Maria and David somehow had a hand in bringing us together? If they somehow knew what we would need?" It was a question Daniel had considered many times over the past year. The statistical improbability of finding someone who understood his specific grief, who connected with his son in such a meaningful way, who complemented his parenting in areas where he struggled most. "I'd like to think they'd approve," he said finally. "That they'd want us to find happiness again, even if it came from an unexpected direction." Sophia leaned her head against his shoulder, a gesture of trust and comfort that had become familiar. "I never planned to fall in love again," she admitted softly. "Especially not with my employee and his dinosaur-obsessed son." Daniel smiled at the teasing note in her voice. "And I never planned to fall for my intimidating boss who corrects my grammar in emails. Only when it's egregious," she protested with a laugh. Their laughter faded into comfortable silence, the kind that comes with true understanding. After a moment, Daniel turned to face her more directly. "I don't know what the future holds," he said honestly. "But I do know that Jake and I are better with you in our lives. And if you're willing, I'd like to see where this journey takes us." Sophia's eyes, so often guarded in their early days, were now open and clear as she looked at him. "I'd like that too," she said simply. As they sat together under the stars, Daniel reflected on the strange path that had led them here. How a professional relationship had transformed into something neither of them had been looking for but both desperately needed. How grief could carve spaces in a life that might someday be filled with new love, not replacing what was lost but creating something different, something equally precious. In the quiet of the evening, with Jake sleeping peacefully inside and Sophia's hand warm in his, Daniel understood that purpose rarely announced itself with fanfare. More often, it arrived disguised as coincidence or chance, a new boss with a familiar smile, a child's innocent question, a moment of connection across a conference table. And sometimes, if you were brave enough to recognize it, purpose offered not just healing but the promise of a new beginning, a family forged not from obligation or expectation, but from choice, understanding, and love that had weathered the hardest storms life could bring. The journey ahead would have its challenges. They would need to navigate the complexities of blending their lives, of honoring their past losses while embracing their future together, of helping Jake understand that love could expand without diminishing what came before. But for the first time since losing Maria, Daniel faced the future not with dread but with hope. Because sometimes, the most beautiful purpose is found in the people who see us at our most vulnerable and choose to stay anyway. If this story of unexpected connection and healing touched your heart, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more stories that explore how love finds us in the most surprising ways, often when we need it most but expect it least.